Hey everyone, welcome back to State of Anarchy. It's been a while, our apologies. Alvaro's been doing his thing, I've been doing mine. Alvaro, where are you at the moment?
Hello, everybody. I'm currently in Brussels. I'm working here for the summer, and life got in the middle, and we weren't able to deliver on our podcasts as we wanted to. But we're going to solve this issue now, as we're going to delve in a really interesting topic today. Really topical because it relates to something that is happening as we speak, which is the national elections in Spain. And my friend Peter and I were going to discuss the main differences between the electoral system in Spain and the one in the US.
Yeah, it's a very real life application of global politics, right, Alvaro? So there are some key differences. Would you like to go first, or should I get us started on the US system?
I mean, I can go first with the Spanish system very briefly. Spain is a proportional system, has a proportional system, which means that all votes are allocated to a party according to a mathematic law, which in this case is the don't law don't. It was in honor of a famous, I think, mathematician who invented this system in order to allocate every vote. So, for example, if there's 5 parties and they all get votes, and according to the rules, every party that should have a seat, allocated seat that is going to be elected. So, for example, if we compare it to the US, which is the first past, first post, means that the party who gets all the votes gets all the seats. That could be like the most important difference.
You know, from your point of view, what's like the biggest consequence? So we can understand all of these rules and so on, but then we're just getting back into theory, aren't we? So in the real world, what does that look like? So how would you say that these two separate systems result in different outcomes for the countries?
Definitely, well, technically, the proportional system tends to be more democratic because all parties and they have votes from all the people, and they get a share of the pie as an expression. On the contrary, it has a major drawback, which is that it can be really difficult to form a coalition or, for example, form a government. If there are parties that are too separated on the political spectrum, it's going to be really difficult for them to find an agreement if all parties have a voice and have a seat.
So for my American people here, because I know we don't really know what goes on in other countries so much. I think that's fair to say. Don't get offended, anyone in the US, but when you say a coalition, can you clarify for our American audience or US audience, excuse me?
Yeah, that's a really European concept. Coalition. Actually, it wasn't that like I mean, the last government in Spain was the first coalition government in Spain in the democratic history of Spain. It was the first because there was never a huge tradition of coalition. It was either Partido Socialista or Partido Popular governing by themselves or by the acceptance of other minor political parties. So it is a coalition government. It's a government that is formed by several political parties, in the sense that usually the head of the government is the head of the political party that got the most votes. But in order to give their support, to form the government, the members of the political parties, minor political parties, can become ministers in the government.
Yeah.
So they're all being condensed in the same government because they all participate in it. It's not only all members from a same party, but all the members from different parties are in the same government.
Yeah. Well, the concept of having multiple parties competing in competitive and tight and democratic elections is honestly something that's kind of foreign here in the US. Here in the US, you get offered two choices, Democrat or Republican. Those are the only two political parties with any real chance of winning the election. And like you said, whoever wins the presidential election, that's it. That party gets the entire executive branch of the government.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest difference, I think, that we have a president, right, in the US, and you guys have a head of parliament. So in our case, we have, well, you also have a president. So explain to us how exactly the president of Spain is different from the president of the US, if you could.
Well, it's I mean, in the case of Spain, it's different because we have a monarchy. So technically, the head of a state is the monarch, but he doesn't have any power. And the head of the government, on the contrary, is the one that holds all the power, and he's elected by the parliament. And he has, I mean, he has the most power in the Spanish state. However, he doesn't have as much power as the president of the United States has. The president of the United States is a presidential system. They have an insane amount of power if compared to the president of the government in Spain.
Yeah. Yeah, I
It could
mean,
be similar. No,
I
I
was
was
just
gonna
gonna
say
say
that.
of the US can make unilateral decisions. So just by
Yes,
himself or herself, maybe someday.
yeah, I was going to say that it could be more comparable to France, for example. In France, the president of the republic, Emmanuel Macron, it's more similar to the US. For example, Spain, it's different because we have the monarch and it's the head of a state. It's a formal figure, but he doesn't have any power really. It's like more divided. The power is more diffused.
Yeah, I mean, in the US, we try to divide it as well, but the political system often becomes the captive of the president because the legislature and the judicial branch. However, it can sometimes be the reverse. So I feel like currently Joe Biden has to compromise a lot with the legislature in the US. But all of these are voted in, shall we say. But this brings me to the
Yeah.
next point that I'd like to address, which is like things like campaign advertising and campaign finance. Here in the United States, there are very few limits about donating money to political candidates and advertising about on television or on the radio or on the internet. That's one thing I'm very curious about, Alvaro. Is it different in Spain, the campaign finance and so on?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. In Spain, it's funny because we have the laws that regulate these topics, in the sense that there's a lot of provisions that say that there has to be transparency in the donations of political parties and stuff, and there's a wide legal corpus of text stating how things should be done. But the thing is that in the past, we've already had some scandals related to this topic that show that this system that we have is not working. And there's not enough transparency in political parties and certain political figures. If they want to get a donation and want to have their way, they're gonna find a way to get that and to circumvent the system. At the moment, there was several proposals to change this system, but it hasn't come to fruition. And at the moment, it's not that bad. There's not that many public outcry, but I think that it will come eventually. At some point, we will try to change that.
So how do you make changes to the election or electoral system in that case in Spain?
Yeah. Well, the law that regulates the electoral process in Spain, it's an organic law. It's that organic ley orgánica, and in order to modify this law, it has to be approved by the majority of the parliament, which is quite complicated. It didn't used to be that complicated a few years ago because we had a tradition of always being, absolute majority of Partido Socialista or absolute majority of Partido Popular. But now we have the coalition government. It's proven really difficult to find consensus in order to change the law. So I think that could happen, but it's something that there has to be a lot of consensus and a lot of agreement between all political parties, which is in Spain, it's really difficult.
Well, generally speaking, in the US, as of late, there have been a lot of more conservative politicians and political parties that have found success in recent years. No example is more prominent than Donald Trump in 2016 winning the presidential election. And then since then, a lot of smaller bodies, such as state legislatures and even local municipalities and so on, they have elected more conservative officials. Even in states like Massachusetts, where I am, there has been more of a Republican, aka conservative slant. So is the same true in Spain, or is it more varied?
Can you repeat the question, because I didn't understand it?
So in the US, we've been electing a lot more conservatives. Not making a judgment one way or the other, but just
So
based
you
on
think that
facts.
there's been there's been power is being transferred in another direction. Actually, in Spain, we had Rajoy during great part of the last decade. Then it was Pedro Sanchez, which is left wing, and he governed with a coalition from left wing political parties. But now it seems that it's going to be the right wing again. So it's cyclical. It's not about this is happening now, right wing is gaining now. No, it's cyclical. It's right wing is going to win now. Probably the next election is going to be left wing again. It's Spanish politics are really cyclical in that sense.
Oh, American too, or US politics too. Sorry for my Latin people.
American.
Yeah. One every 4-year cycle or 8-year cycle, it just goes back and forth.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of issues.
What do you think? Do you think that Trump is gonna be there for the 2024 elections?
You know, right now the election season has just begun. And there's a wide variety of candidates on both sides. But generally speaking, in the US, there are usually just a few key issues which determine how voters participate in the system. So you have to remember, first and foremost, that in the US, party identity is probably the #1 indicator of how someone's going to vote. So if someone says, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, in most cases, that's how they'll vote. And this is one of my favorite things that I learned while a student doing my undergrad political science. Alvaro, what do you think is the second biggest indicator of how someone is going to vote, at least for president in the United States? We have data to back this up.
Race?
Sorry?
Race?
Race? You're close. Well, race is kind of part of it.
I don't know then. Please light me up.
Physical appearance.
Physical appearance? How so?
More attractive candidates are more likely to win. Although with Trump, maybe that rule is...
Okay, I got the question wrong. I thought that according to vote, according to there was a little bit of a lag there.
So yeah, Alvaro, the physical appearance is the second biggest indicator of a candidate's success. What do you think about that in US politics?
And I find it completely understandable. There's been a current trend in European politics of really attractive candidates. For example, the current president of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, he's thought to be one of the most beautiful presidents in Europe. There's also Macron in France. I mean, I don't find him that attractive, but I mean, if like people say so, that's for a reason, I guess. So yeah, definitely.
Not for us to decide. It's for all the 65-year-olds of the world to decide whether Macron is attractive.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is a thing about politics. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that in the US, there's very little substance, right? And I can go on and on about criticisms of the system. So I think it's worthwhile taking it back a second. So I think we have a better understanding of how Spain works and how the US works, basically. But What would you say is missing from the Spanish electoral system that you would like to see changed? And what would a perfect electoral system look like, in your opinion?
Wow, that's a really difficult question, man. I don't know. I think that I like the proportional system. If I could choose, if I had a state to my name and I could design it from scratch, I would choose the proportional system because I think that it's more democratic, even though it has its drawbacks in the sense that it's difficult to form a government sometimes. But I understand that in certain occasions, for example, the US system, the first past first post system, can be really useful in certain situations to prevent the blockage of institutions and for example you need to take quick action. I understand that the US system is much better, so probably it could be a combination of both of them, combining the democratic feature of the proportional but also implementing the practicality of the US system, if I explain myself correctly.
Well, it's practical, but at the price of representativeness, in my opinion, because
Legitimacy as well. Yeah.
yeah. So for me, the best example of the problems of the US system is the state of Montana, right? So in the United States, in a presidential election, each state has a certain number of electors, and these electors vote, and the first candidate to receive 273 electoral votes wins. So for example, California has 50 because they have, do you know, Alvaro? Why does California have so many votes?
A lot of people living there. No.
That's correct. So there are a bunch of people living in California. The problem is there are more cows than people living in Montana, and
The
they
Netherlands
have
as well.
a very disproportionate number of electoral votes. So that's a problem. But for me, the practicality component, it is important. And to quote my man J. Cole, who's a well-known rapper, he described a system where you just receive a tablet and you receive a bunch of suggestions on the tablet or propositions to vote for, and you use this technology to vote. So do you think that's a good resolution? So leaving kind of people, elected officials out of it and just having a more direct democracy approach using current technology?
No, I think that's a debate that it's too old and it's already overcome that debate. The one of direct democracy, unless in my unless in my opinion, it. I mean, it was nice in the ancient Greece when it could be done, or the Romans. I understand that, but nowadays I think that it's not feasible. It's impossible. There's too much disinformation out there. People living in some kind of realities that they're not really like their lives that we're living. So I think that it's direct democracy is not the solution in this case. I don't know what I mean. If you agree with that or not, what do you think?
Well, it just makes me wonder in that case, why give people the right to vote anyway? Because at the end of the day, the government has the most control and the most competent people, right? So why give people the right to vote at all?
Well, it's a mechanism of transmission. It's the people in the electors in the U.S., the congressmen in Spain, and then the government. So technically it should work like a well-oiled machine in the sense that people vote the candidates, and the candidates transmit the will of the people to the government. I honestly think that this is the best system. That eliminating the intermediate, the middleman, it's not the solution. And I could give you a lot of reasons for that, but
Please
I think
do.
that no, I think that we should not dwell on that too much, and we should try
Yeah.
to focus on other topics because this is too philosophical, and I don't think that people is going to enjoy this kind of content.
Well, leave it in the comments. Alvaro and I would love to hear, for example, about your country's electoral system and how it's interesting or unique in any way.
Yeah, and if
And
you
whether,
think that wait,
no, go ahead.
no, and if you think that direct democracy is actually an option, that's also a really interesting question.
So what about the extreme opposite end where you have just like a council of people or a single ruler deciding everything that happens, like in the case of North Korea? Do you think that, or China, do you think that's a good system?
So I'm not authoritarian. I'm not authoritarian, bro.
So why do you think authoritarianism has gotten so much more popular? Because I feel like it has. Maybe I'm wrong, but
No, I mean it's definitely it has seen a rise in the recent years. And if you look at all the political indexes out there, the economies, the VDM, all of them show that there has been an increase in authoritarian tendencies all over the world. And that's a good question of why this is happening. I think that there are many countries that do not have a well-established democratic system, and if you don't have that, it's really easy to fall into authoritarianism. So unless you have a system that is stable and well-oiled, and it's been democratic for a lot of years and centuries even, it's really easy to fall back into authoritarianism, which is always an option. It's always there. It's not gonna fail. On the contrary, democracy, yes, it's the best system, I think. However, it's really difficult to implement, and it can lead to tensions and conflict between people, sometimes inducing war and civil conflicts, and it's easier to fall back into authoritarianism again. What do you think?
well, I have a very realist view of this, going back to our previous episode and going back to the theme of the title of our podcast, The State of Anarchy. So, in an anarchic world, um, how do you see the effect of uh, global politics in relation to these domestic politics? From my point of view, global politics ultimately have not that much meaning. Uh, I say this mostly as someone who is very interested in environmental issues. So for me, politics should get stuff done, right? And the fact that so little has gotten done in terms of kind of trying to slow down the effects of environmental issues, not even climate change, but even things like pollution or waste management. So those things have real effects, and I think sometimes an authoritarian system appeals to people because, first of all, they don't have to make decisions themselves, which some people like. And second of all, you can solve these bigger problems like in China, because in China you don't have to worry about getting elected every 4 years. You just make a plan for 20 years and then you build cities with 60 million inhabitants. So there are obviously drawbacks, but I think, again, going back to the whole geopolitical conflict in the world today, right?
Hmm?
Russia, Ukraine, and so on. You can see how these two systems are clashing, really. Democracy and authoritarianism.
Yeah, I think that I'm gonna say something here that is I found it really interesting. So I've been reading Dostoevsky a lot lately, and okay, I'm going to connect it to the present in the sense that when the war in Ukraine started, I started to hear a lot of statements from Vladimir Putin talking about the West. It's like, yeah, the West. We're talking about the West as if talking about from the point of view of Russia not being part of the West. And I found it really interesting because I mean, Russia, technically half of Russia is Europe, and it's Europe is the West technically, or is part of the West. And I always found it really interesting because he spoke of the West as something that is foreign, that is not Russia. And I think that he's making a mistake. But the thing is that coming back to Dostoevsky, already in the 18th century, there are excerpts from Dostoevsky in which there is the same narrative, exactly the same narrative. No, Russia is not part of the West. Russia is something different. So I think that it's really interesting, and it shows how rooted is the problem in the past. That there's this detachment of the West from the rest of the world, even if technically half of Russia is still the West. And I think that it clearly shows how the problem is not a problem that is, I mean, it's showing its intensity now, but I think it's been latent there for a lot of time, a lot of centuries.
Yes, definitely. It's something that goes back to the days of people in tents living nomadic lifestyles.
Exactly.
Now things
Cossacks.
have gotten a little bit more complicated, right?
Mhm.
So, for me, I'm optimistic that at some point in the future, there will be some sort of technology which allows us to innovate when it comes to the electoral system, because that's one thing that's sorely missing, in my opinion. This kind of innovation. So we always want to think of the newest technology, the newest, the best, the most efficient technology, but when it comes to our electoral systems, I think we're stuck in the past. And do you think there's such a need for innovation, or do you disagree?
I mean, I only hope that Elon Musk doesn't develop this technology.
But
But
we
yeah,
don't
no,
here.
no. I mean, seriously, sometimes I'm skeptical of technology. I'm not. I don't believe in technology in technology being able to solve all the issues that we may have.
Yeah, not all of them, but maybe some of them.
Some of
Uh,
them, yeah, sure. But we will create
so,
another ones in exchange.
yeah. So we're running out of time slowly. We don't want to keep people here too long. So to wrap things up, I thought we might go back to the general question that I'd like to pose at the end of each episode. So have you been reading, watching, or listening to anything that you'd like to suggest to all of the viewers? Because the best thing that you can do is open these doors for people. So have you been have you been in touch with anything lately?
Yeah, definitely. I would recommend the Idiot by Dostoevsky. I read it and I loved it. I already mentioned it before. I completely love the book, and I think that it's a must read. I think it's even better than the Brothers Karamazov, but usually
I
Brothers Karamazov gets all the praise and the fame, but sometimes it's like that. But yeah, a fantastic book.
I have two suggestions on the watching TV front. I would suggest a TV show called Ted Lasso. I think this TV show has a lot to teach people about politics, surprisingly, but it's a TV show which makes a lot of political jokes if you are willing to read between the lines. And then when it comes to books, Alvaro, I don't know if you've ever read this, but during the summer where I have a hard time motivating myself, pushing myself forward, I always look for motivation. So I found a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and I've reread it recently. Have you read that?
Nope. What is it about?
It's about a survivor of concentration camps during World War II, how he survived, what happened to him there, and then the life philosophy that he developed as a result of the concentration camps. So uh, there's a question that, or there's a quote which he says, and it says, "Don't as long as you have a why, you don't need to worry about the how." And that's what I want to leave everyone with today. So any
Okay.
last words, Alvaro, before we finish up?
No, no, no. That was a really nice way of ending.
Yeah, and this all relates. So elections are how we participate in politics, whether it's domestically or globally. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Alvaro, it's been a pleasure as always.
As always,
All right, take care, man. Take care, everyone.
take care.